Thanks, Delphine. Hey, everybody. I'm Dave Moore, Director of Product for Comcare, and very welcome to this webinar. So in this webinar, we'll be talking about interoperability. We all know in our sector, everybody wants to talk about interoperability. Everybody wants to hear about interoperability. We asked some of our partners what interoperability means for them, and we got 10 different but very unique answers and insightful answers. So that provoked us to put this webinar together. So I'm really looking forward to the insights and the conversations this webinar will generate. And today we have 4 speakers. Firstly, there's Rashmi. Rashmi is the ICT and Programs Advisor at Trocaire, an Irish NGO working in partnerships with communities in over 20 countries. In Trocaire, she leads the organizational priorities in ethical, safe, and appropriate use of technology in programs and manages adoption of technology to increase program effectiveness and efficiency. Welcome, Rashmi. After that, we have Tony. Tony is currently the Senior Digital Development Specialist at Global Communities. Before joining Global Communities, he spent 4 years in Zambia, where he served as a Peace Corps volunteer. He currently supports Global Communities' digital development work in embedding technology across the organization and its programming, with specialization in Merle Tech, GIS, and data visualization. Welcome, Tony. After that, we have our very own Mary. Mary, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Rochlow. I'm the Associate Director of Technology Solutions at Tamagi. I lead our solutions tech team focused on some custom solutions built on top of Comcare.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. And finally, we have Jenna. Jenna is an Operational Information Officer at MSI Reproductive Choices, an organization that provides reproductive health care in 37 countries worldwide. She works primarily on the implementation and embedding of MSI's mobile health systems for frontline healthcare providers and community-based mobilizers in Africa and Asia. Welcome, Jenna. All right, so as I was mentioning, we've been talking a lot about about interoperability and what it means for INGOs, and we got so many different answers that we had to put this webinar together. So I'm sure today there'll be a lot of talking points and there'll be a lot of interesting conversations and takeaways. But what I'm hoping that this webinar will help us explore these following questions. So, how do I align interoperability within my INGO that is aligned with the needs? How does interoperability evolve over time in an INGO? And I'm really looking forward to Tony's perspective on this. Can interoperability deliver both immediate and long-term value? In terms of there's this, what we've learned, that there's this perception of interoperability being a long-term, expensive project, but we all know that all programs need immediate value, but also have an expectation about long-term value. How does INGO decentralization and interoperability work together? So I'm really hoping we could chat about that as well. And finally, how do we manage our interoperability cost sustainably? So with that, I would love to pass the baton to Rashmi, who will share Trocaire's perspective on interoperability. Rashmi?
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. My name is Rashmi, and I'm the ICT and Programs Advisor in Trocaire. We are an Irish NGO, like Dave said, and we work in 20 different countries in humanitarian, advocacy, and development projects. So what sets us apart is that we're not direct implementers. We work in a partnership model, and that means we have over 300 local community-based organizations that we partner with to implement our projects. So that means everything we do is looked at from a partnership perspective, including technology and our digital journey. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about where we were, how we've evolved, and where we're headed. So where we were. To be perfectly honest, we as an organization, we were a bit behind the curve when it came to using technology in development. Prime example is, the primary means of data collection for our projects was pen and paper until about maybe 4 years ago. But some of our more adventurous countries had gone off and found, some technology solutions that they wanted to use on their own. They had hired consultants that designed systems. So there was no real standardization in the roadmap. One thing that became very clear in all of this was also that our partners who were implementing the projects and collecting all of this information on our behalf had no direct access to the data that they were collecting. And if we are to be really honest, technology was also not a really big part of our organizational strategy. So our old strategy from 2015 to 2020 had maybe 1 or 2 lines about technology use and ICT fatigue. But I'm very happy to say that we have come a long way since then. And we have evolved significantly, specifically in our ICT for D work. So specifically, there are 3 priorities in this area. So number 1, standardization and harmonization of technological solutions. We want solutions that our partners can access and that caters to various user profiles. Where appropriate, we also want tech solutions that satisfy not only our current needs, but anticipated future needs and use cases. So what that means is we are increasingly becoming more and more selective about our tech use. So not every exciting new idea is worth pursuing. And I suppose by virtue of being a relatively small organization, we're not really that small, but when we compare ourselves to other big players in the sector, we don't really have that much resource. So we have to be selective, we have to be purposeful about what we pursue. And that really pushes us to be more creative and find creative use cases for traditionally what would be single purpose technological solutions. And then finally, in this evolution, we have started to also prioritize and be more mindful about data and information sharing with our partners, while keeping data protection at the forefront of any new or existing technology or process. Next slide. So where do we want to be? First, we want to minimize use of customized, purpose-built, single-purpose systems. What do we want to continue doing? We want to continue investing in solutions that work in varying contexts, constraints, that will last long into the future. And we also want to continue to seek solutions that can be repurposed and reused in more innovative ways. And we really want to start to make use of the information that already exists in all of our systems for proper decision making. And I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. So what does interoperability mean for us? So in the technical sense, it's systems that are integrated and they talk to each other. So the prime example I can give you is Comcare. So we used Comcare last year. We integrated it with Interoperability, which is an SMS provider for remote SMS-based monitoring and remote surveys during the height of the pandemic. Another example is Salesforce and Box. Salesforce is our grants management system. Box is where all of our project documentations lie, so they work seamlessly together and are integrated together. And the dream is that this year, Q3, we want to integrate a BI tool with all of these systems. And the vision is that we will be able to garner very meaningful information pulled from all of these systems to inform programming. So this is, in a nutshell, what interoperability would mean in a traditional sense. But in a non-traditional sense, next slide, please. Interoperability for us, when we think about within our organization, we're not really very technologically heavy, software heavy folks. So when we look at our programming, when we talk to our meal colleagues and our program colleagues, what does interoperability mean? So what was very clear is for us, interoperability was more in the sense of varying use cases. So another example, Comcare. We started using Comcare specifically for monitoring and evaluation surveys. So to speed up capturing of information for data accuracy and all of the normal reasons, regular reasons why we switched to mobile data collection. But over the years, by using Comcare, we have seen potential to use it for more diverse use cases. So we use Comcare not just for our surveys, but we have trained some of our program participants how to use Comcare to do citizen-led monitoring. So there are farmers who are trained on Comcare app, and they submit information about agriculture implementation in their communities. There are human rights defenders that use Comcare to report instances of human rights abuse in their community. So that's a very different use case. We've used, like I said, Comcare for SMS-based monitoring. And in the future, we want to use Comcare for beneficiary registration, for feedbacks and complaint handling, for case management, and hopefully many more instances. So that in a nutshell is really how we look at interoperability in our organization. That's all from me.
Awesome. Thanks, Rashmi. Thank you for sharing. I find the term interoperable use cases very interesting. Generally we tend to think of interoperability from a technical lens, but it's really interesting, how every organization, organically produces their own needs and definition for interoperability. Rashmi, I'll be very curious to hear from you around, how does an INGO think about future-proofing their success when they're looking for a data collection platform? In other words, did you know that you would eventually need to integrate with a BI tool? Did you know that at some point you would be also integrating with SMS gateways? So would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I suppose for us, when we started looking at, and just taking the very specific example of mobile data collection tool, we really spent a lot of time doing a lot of interviews with our colleagues, the people who actually are in countries implementing projects, designing projects, and we listened to the stories, success stories, failure stories of how they have tried to use technology before. So the enthusiasm to use technology was already there in our countries. Like I had mentioned, some had gone off and started using things on their own. So people really wanted to streamline this process, and they had so many ideas. So it was really a struggle actually to kind of narrow down the use cases. So for us, we had some projects that were going to start, some grant applications that we had already in motion. So we knew how technology could potentially play a role in those instances as well. And we really use that as a guide to say, okay, as an organization, there are these areas where we work. These are the potential use cases in the future where we could use technology. So now let's go find a technology solution or one or two technology solutions that might, help us not just now, but in the future where we are planning to go as an organization in our programmatic needs.
Got it.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Rashmi. All right. Next, we have Tony from Global Communities. Tony.
Thanks. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in the world or where I'm at. It's very early. But my name is Tony. I'm the Senior Specialist for Digital Development at Global Communities, which we have actually just created a new unit, provide digital development services across the organization. It actually sits within IT. So we support M&E. I come from the M&E space and now moving into the IT space. And I can talk a little bit more about that. It might make more sense once we start talking about my presentation. So next slide. So I guess the first thing is interoperability is probably as we were preparing for this webinar, I think it's important to realize that it's probably more of a word that comes from the industry, the platforms, the technology. I don't know if any other INGOs would have come up with the word interoperability. It seems to be like tagged onto the sales pitches and things like that. So I'm going to attempt to try to like demystify or try to like share what that really means for us. But like all good things, interoperability is probably a progression, a spectrum. So I think if we take Comcare, for example, about, at least for my journey as well, with global communities, about 7 years ago, when I started, it was merely to do mobile data collection surveys, once-off surveys, assessments. And I think it was convincing the organization that mobile is the future. Digital data collection is going to change everything. And that's pretty obvious now, I think, in terms of how much faster, quicker, and more efficient and accurate and stronger and all those good things that comes with mobile data collection. Then if you fast forward, right, and that had its own interoperability, you take the data out, you export it out, and you had another person analyze it and create reports and assessments and clean the data. Fast forward a few, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, seems like the whole industry was shifting to Power BI dashboards, but focusing a lot on, I think there was a lot of focus on the final product, but there's a lot of work on the back end in terms of interoperability. Take the data out, can you translate? Then we became data brokers. How do we translate the information collected on that mobile device and translate it to the business owners or business process owners in order to understand what's actually happening? And then now we're probably embarking on this interoperability, or how does now this connect to the larger ecosystem of not just your M&E data, but your financial data, your operations data, right? I think many organizations like ours are moving into ERP or on various stages of that. But I think with the holy grail of being able to go from dollars to impact, I think is kind of what we're thinking about. Of course, this comes with exponential growth in terms of interoperability and complexity. So, but for now, I'll go with a prime example. So next slide. So for small context, specific one project, I think, about a year ago, actually, a year ago, we started embarking on a contract with this county of San Diego here in California to do contact tracing. And it was I guess, in the sense, emergency programming. We were assigned contacts every day, and then we had to call them 3 days. So we stood up a whole contact tracing program we stood up from remote. I don't think we spent a year without meeting anyone. We sent things remotely, but we built a whole platform in Comcare to do the contact tracing. We assigned it to our agents. We originally wanted to do the holy grail of interoperability, which is integrating with the county system to update the contacts that we've reached them. We were getting them isolating, but that came down to, that wasn't possible because of technology integration barriers, I think, with contracts and all that. So we ended up having to use multiple systems, extract information out, but we did as best as we could to automate ingestion of contacts into our system, so it gets assigned to our contact tracers. And then we automated the reporting, as you can see in the middle. So this kind of getting information in, getting information out, or updating information, getting it out and reporting on, that in a sense is what interoperability really means, is what we're doing. So, but this is one scope. I'm happy to talk more about it later, but the next slide. I think we have to think about in terms of the big picture. What does this mean for the next steps in terms of interoperability? That is one small ecosystem where we can control over everything and a specific use case. So where we are in the road ahead, in the next slide, is we are that little car driving along this journey to interoperable or to well-connectedness. So I think if we, for those on the call, to think about, where's your organization sitting in this spectrum or this journey? And it could be, for us, we had certain projects or activities that were very full on embedded, like I just showed. But, as an organization at the big picture level, if you start in the beginning, we had a tool or multiple tools. then you sort of bring together multiple tools to create your data infrastructure to translate data, become data brokers, explain that out. And then, now as we think about interoperability, we're on the journey of now building the infrastructure. How do we create a support model to the organization, to projects, to implement technologies, to do good work, essentially, just like everyone else. But we're starting to embark on the ERP process, enterprise results management, so that we can get to a dollars to impact end goal, probably many years down the line. But as you can see, it requires a lot of infrastructure, a lot of governance set up, and in order to just even begin to embark on that. So that's our journey on interoperability. So
awesome. Thanks, Tony. Tony, you mentioned the fact that your team serves multiple stakeholders, and each of these stakeholders have their own needs for interoperability. What kind of challenges and opportunities it provides when you're serving such a wide spectrum?
Right. I think that's a good question, because we just started the unit literally 3 months ago, as we merged with Project Concern International, and what we have is 2 people working in this space, and part of it is that we're beginning to realize that, say for example, Comcare's use case for mobile data collection M&E has different, as Rashmi mentioned, interoperability with other functions across the organization, or that same concept, right? The skills developed to implement these projects is transferable to business development, to forecasting, right? Like all of that is well connected. So that's where we're beginning to think about. It cannot be siloed within the M&E neural technology space, but we need to start thinking about a larger scope. So, challenges are, well, now we're looking at an organizational endeavor or a change management. We need to think about building capacity across the whole organization to think this way. But opportunities, and now hopefully we'll get more connected so that we can begin to connect things that traditionally would have been connected, in a sense. So it's super early stages, and then I'm super excited to see what happens. But it's a messy work and hard work.
Got it. Thanks, Tony. Also, a fun fact about Tony is, Tony made a very significant contribution towards, our direct BI integration with OData, with his feedback and, Power BI expertise. I mean, he practically designed that solution. So we are.
I wouldn't go so that far. But thank you. Yes, very exciting stuff that we worked on early on. So it's another webinar for another time.
All right. Now we have Mary, our Associate Director for Technology Solutions, talking about the Comcare ecosystem and our latest addition to that ecosystem, which is our Comcare Plus DHIS integration. Over to you, Mary.
Awesome. Thanks, Dev. Yeah, we can jump right into the next slide. So when we think about creating a digital health system, data pipelines are really the key to accurate and fresh data, and a well-built data pipeline enables you to capture that community level information and then aggregate it up into ad hoc reporting or routine ongoing analysis. So data is really like the key that powers that digital health system. So it enables ministries of health to analyze indicators. It allows donors to assess the impact of their funding. And then it also empowers ICT4D teams to deliver on those stakeholder needs. But this data is really not powerful unless it's super accurate and really up to date. So interoperable systems have been demonstrated to improve the continuity of care, and with it the chance of positive health outcomes. So as the prevalence of these health information systems has grown, the complexity of the data within those ecosystems has also exponentially increased, as we've seen from some of the previous panelists. So Comcare and DHIS2 are used around the world for that end-to-end data pipeline, from remote data capture all the way over to district and national level health scale reporting. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a case study to explore how we can integrate those two in an interoperable way. So Demagi and Malaria Consortium have partnered together to build an application called Upscale. Community health workers in Mozambique conduct health promotion activities and provide community case management for malaria, pneumonia, other health conditions throughout Mozambique. And in 2016, Demagi and Malaria Consortium built this application called Upscale to support community health workers to deliver on their work, collect and aggregate information from different program activities and cover like various regions throughout the country. Separately, the Ministry of Health in Mozambique selected DHIS2 to collect that community level information and aggregate it into national health indicators. So kind of seeing that and in response to that larger ecosystem, Demagi and Malaria Consortium adapted the Upscale application to include an integration with DHIS to make that end-to-end connection happen. Without a direct connection between those platforms, data submission would either be duplicated or be sort of a manual process, extra staff kind of entering the data in both places, could be delayed data, increased cost for all that activity, or data entry errors, which we know are rife to happen. So on the next slide, I know that integrations are really valuable, but they can also be like super complicated. And these are three sort of barriers that we've seen, or complexities that we've seen, not comprehensive. I'm sure we could all add a lot more, but specifically when we're thinking about this ecosystem in Mozambique, these are three that came to mind. So first, the system configuration is really complex. DHIS2 and Comcare have really specific terminology that are unique to each of those platforms, and users have to be fluent in both of those languages. By design, these systems are really configurable, which is a great asset to our programs, but that means a really complicated mapping process to get data between these two systems. Often multiple tools are required in order to facilitate that data exchange. Users often are interacting with configuration pages or logs, or it's command line tools to test those connections, and testing might be different than bringing it live. So ongoing troubleshooting and maintenance and scaling these can be really complex and challenging, and be like a really iterative and ongoing process. And then thirdly, often there's limited resources in these contexts. Documentation is often really technical, focused on the code maybe, or dev level documentation. Like I mentioned, the language or the lingo used on each of these platforms can be really different, and there are a limited number of resources available for supporting these integrations. So on the next slide, kind of seeing some of these challenges, Demagi worked on creating this turnkey integration between Comcare and DHIS2 to allow the Ministry of Health to create a national level dashboard with that community level data that was being collected in Comcare. And data sets are automatically transferred from those individual form submissions on Comcare over into that national DHIS2 dashboard. This enables the ministry's M&E team to visualize data in real time at the national, but also district and provincial levels throughout the Mozambique health system. And users can view data either at that individual form level in Comcare, or in a user-friendly like kind of visualization format in DHIS to support that data-driven decision-making around program investments and surveillance and health outcomes ultimately. And Demagi recently launched this integration with DHIS as a self-service offering, kind of in response to some of those challenges that I went through on the previous slide. And our hope is that we've addressed many of these challenges, probably not all, but we hope many of them, and enabled teams to get these integrations up and running independently, and to maintain them on their own as the program naturally evolves and scales over time. And then on the next slide, just lastly, DHIS isn't the only tool. It's obviously the one that we focused on here, but there's a lot of other ways you can integrate your data, Comcare data, with other tools. We have a number of off-the-shelf offerings to integrate with other tools that might be in that data pipeline, so that ICT4D or M&E teams can kind of use that data on demand. That being said, we know integrations are really complex and can often be really custom. So we also have a solutions team that can work with your program to tailor integration that fits for purpose or is highly custom. We know that integrations need to work really well and be robust and really collaborative, both in development and maintenance, and having both those turnkey options, but also those really customizable options helps us invest time in making the really complex scenarios work well, so that the turnkey ones can kind of fit those out of the box needs. And our hope is that organizations around the world can really recognize and maximize the utility of that community level data that they're collecting, especially when it comes to those national level programs. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Dev.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. That was amazing. So one of the things that neither Mary or I mentioned was Mary actually comes to us from Mercy Corps. She was a part of their T4D team. So Mary, like, I'm very curious to hear from your, INGO background and now at Damagi. What have you learned in terms of the importance of an ecosystem for organizational success, particularly how the ecosystem needs to scale as the organization scales and also evolves. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I know there's some of my Mercy Corps colleagues on the webinar today too, so they can speak to these problems and challenges as well. But I think one of the big things is just harmonizing data across an INGO. Often there's kind of like individual country programs that have their own definition for indicators, and kind of reconciling the need for custom or local indicators for a specific program with the kind of centralized definition of those data sets is a really big challenge. And there's strong cases to be made for having each country define those independently, and also strong cases to have those defined more centrally. And I think I observed sort of the evolution of that sway between which indicators to define globally. And then I think the other component is just being able to exchange data, but also lessons learned between programs. Even if indicators aren't the same between different country programs, being able to talk about them in a way to exchange like ideas or findings about how to improve program efficiency is really the value that M&E is bringing to a large INGO. So being able to talk about those and exchange those like throughout the organization is really critical. And I think having a centralized way of talking about that data and ultimately exchanging it really facilitates those learnings to inform better and more stronger programmatic outcomes.
Got it. Thanks, Mary. Mary, additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts on how you envision the Comcare ecosystem to expand in the future. Particularly, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on adherence to interoperable standards like FHIR.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of exciting potential conversations in the digital health space around, as you said, FHIR and other data exchange standards. I think Comcare can continue to play a really critical role in those discussions, but ultimately the value of Comcare is being a flexible platform. So while those data exchange standards might change over time, and we can certainly make sure that Comcare is compatible with each of those, the value is that it is a platform that facilitates that data exchange, not that we're really locking into one place or one sort of technical exchange methodology. So I'm really excited about Comcare continuing to be central to those digital health ecosystems and being able to move data between those platforms. Also thinking about more ways to visualize data and analyze that data more ad hoc and on demand. Like I think we've seen on this panel, the ability to explore your data and then gain insight from it is really where the value comes. So continuing to make sure that data collected in Comcare is able to be like merged with other data sets that are collected in other components of the ecosystem will be increasingly important.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Next, we have Jenna from MSI Reproductive Choices. Jenna?
Yeah, thanks very much, Dave. So hi, everyone. It's a pleasure joining you today. As Dave said, my name is Jenna de St. Jor, and I'm an Operational Information Officer at MSI Reproductive Choices. So at MSI, we provide reproductive healthcare across 37 countries, and I work in the international office and support 15 country programs with mobile app and data use. Next slide, please. So at MSI, we see interoperability as more as an ecosystem. So it wasn't a fully formed idea at the beginning, but it has developed over time and gained traction. So level by level, if you will, as I'll show you in this slide. And it's very much a response to our organization's like growing appetite for data. So having the data accessible to suit the needs of MSI is what makes our organization like better functioning, more cohesive and impactful. So at the core of our ecosystem, we have 3 Comcare apps. So we have one for roving midwives, we have another for community-based mobilizers, and then we have our client feedback app. So in this slide, I'll just take you through the different levels of our CommCare interoperability at our organization. So on this first level, we're looking at kind of our CommCare ecosystem, which is the foundation to it. And what we've done is we've designed apps for global scale. So this means that we've used that linked app setup. So we have a global version of each of our apps, which we link across our 15 country spaces. So this has allowed us, along with using functionalities like display conditions, lookup tables, to enable us to easily maintain one version of the app, but also to make the modifications and adaptations that we need to do for our different country programs. And it also allows us to ensure that the data that we do collect is consistent so that decisions can be made across our countries as well as within our programs itself. Next animation, please. So what we found quite early on is that not all of our users are confident in using our app on a smartphone or on a tablet. So to make sure that we could encompass all of our users, regardless of their IT capacity, and they're able to feed into our ecosystem, we adapted our app to work with CommCare's SMS forms. So this has widened our reach by incorporating this SMS capability. But it also has, we see then that users can use the same app, ensuring like all the data is found in one place and is accessible in that one place, in that one platform. Next animation, please. So as I said, we have 3 apps, and as we continue in this journey of, in our interoperability at MSI, we were finding that some of our users were using 2 or 3 apps. So there was this need to be able to use them together in harmony. So we made a few changes to the app structure. And this was to ensure that our apps, were integrated so that we could have our service delivery, our community mobilization, and client feedback speaking to each other. So this was important for us to make that data collection more seamless. Next animation, please. So looking at the interoperability for our data journey, so early on in our data journey, we relied heavily on CommCare reports and data exports, as I believe many of you have already. So these continue to be really important, especially around like our monthly financial reporting, but they weren't quite meeting what we were expecting for the use around decision making. So we needed something more visual. So as an easy next step, we developed an Excel dashboard and we used CommCare's Excel integration feed for this. So this helped us get a sense of what was important in a data visualization tool. However, there still were some limitations. It wasn't as interactive as we wanted it for our users, and it didn't withstand that test, of scale. So with the support of Demagi here, we developed a Power BI dashboard, and we used OData feeds for this, and this was our preferred solution for having that interactive, easy to use data that our countries were needing to drive their impact. And this, like I said before in a previous level, this means also that our data, from all of our CommCare apps can be accessed in real time, but also in one place. And that was really crucial for this next step for us. Next animation, please. And then finally, and looking forward, and I liked what Rashmi said in terms of like our dreams. And so as part of our next strategic opportunities for interoperability, we are seeing 3 different things that we'll be transitioning to. So we'll soon be transitioning our OData feed setup in Power BI to a CommCare export tool approach. And we'll link this back to our new global data warehouse that we'll be setting up. So this is to ensure that all of our CommCare data is part of not just our CommCare ecosystem, but also our organizational data ecosystem. Then we also plan to link in our contact center CRM. And this is to ensure that seamless referral and follow-up of our clients that are registered in our CommCare apps and also across our other data capture solutions. And then in this final stage, we'll be also building new links between our Comcare location data and a new central repository. So this will be holding information about our different service delivery points. And this will make sure that clients can access the services that they need at their convenience when and where they need them. So thank you all for listening in. And I'll hand it back over to you, Dave, for some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. Jenna, the journey from Comcare reportability reports to our Excel dashboard integration to our Power BI integration to our integration with SQL database as the organization scales makes the product person in me extremely happy, because this is exactly how we anticipated our partners to evolve with these data tools. And there's a lot of intentionality in like how we pick and select this digital tool. So I'm really happy to hear that. Jenna, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on like how does MSI look at interoperability from the lens of managing costs?
Yeah, that's a really good point. For us, like a strategic priority has been to focus on building the capacity in-house for us to be able to like create and manage our apps and our like integrated solutions as well. So that's been a focus for us going through this, our interoperability journey. So while we might see like there's initial costs for that. So for example, if we look at like our data journey, as you were just describing, Dave, we have to make initial costs or investments into the building of our capacity when we talk about like Power BI, for instance. But now that we have that in-house, we're looking at this like being able to not only just manage this and reduce our costs in the long run, but also like this is going to improve like our going to scale and our sustainability for our solutions as well.
Got it. Thanks, Jenna. Rashmi, I would love to hear your thoughts on interoperability from the lens of managing costs and sustainability, because you mentioned Trocaire is extremely selective about the digital tools that you guys use. There's likely that that is also coming from a sustainability lens. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think for us, kind of interoperability also, well, I suppose standardization of tools lends to interoperability. And what I mean by that is, the more tools that we have, the more you need to spend time in setting it up, training people on it, learning about the tool. And as the tool changes, you have to keep yourself up to speed on how the tool itself is evolving from the software provider side. So when I say we're looking for tools in a more selective way, we mean we want to standardize a specific software to build our own internal capacity, to build relationship with the provider, to be able to use it in a larger scale so that we can get more value for money. So in the long run, we're saving time, our own time, in looking at 5 different softwares versus looking at one software. We're saving time and resource in training and capacity building. And what we've also seen is when we have standardized a system or a process, integration and interoperability, you're looking at integrating 1 or 2 systems with each other versus 5 or 6 diverse platforms. Again, like you're going into cost saving, training, and all of that. And one of the main things that we've seen come up is cross-organizational learning. So some people just end up being more interested in learning about a tool and learn it really well and can train others within the organization. So it has lent itself to be kind of a training of trainer model itself. So for our case, we use Salesforce, Comcare, Box, and there are some super users in each of these platforms. And there are core working groups and core learning platforms within the organization where knowledge is constantly being shared, which I don't know if it would have been possible if there were multiple different software that we were using that more or less did the same thing.
Got it. Thanks, Rashmi. Tony, would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, in terms of, how does global communities manage their costs associated with, interoperability needs, and how, like, platforms like Comcare help in addressing the sustainability of costs.
Yeah, good question. I think for those on the call, Global Communities recently merged with Project Concern International. We recently merged. I think we just went through an 18-month process to merge with Global Communities. But from the PCI side in the past, I think what we've spent was, we realized we had a lot of disparate systems in all of our projects because we were small. We didn't have, smallish, did not have the capacity or bandwidth to support a global or standard infrastructure, because we know that takes a lot of resources from the headquarters side. So we actually approached it as a functionality standards versus standardization of platforms. So it had to be able to do certain things. But now, as we're beginning to embark on, now we're as global communities, we are beginning to think about not just in terms of functionality, but actually standardizing the tools, just as Rashmi was mentioning, because it is more efficient. That's not to say that we're mandating countries and projects to use tools that we support, but we say, the approach is now, we have skills and capacity in these platforms, and we've developed them and we've invested time. And if you use it, then we can actually give you economy of scale here. We can have subject matter experts in the same time zone to support you. We have a larger infrastructure, and then that frees up more work to do, additional, higher level integrations or interoperability. So I think at least that's the way. And then what the approach or the strategy we're thinking about is that as part of the digital development unit, we will manage and support these constant learning, evolving around these tools. Today Comcare, tomorrow something else, and we want to make sure that we understand. We're trying to build in a mechanism so that we could not be tied to a specific platform, but have a support model for it. But so far Comcare has done great, and we're satisfied, and we're just engaging in that enterprise discussion. So we're beginning, so for now, that's that's where we are. But yeah,
cool.
Hope that answers the question.
All right, so we have about 12 minutes left, and we would love to do a round of Q&A. Erin Quinn, our wonderful Director of Customer Success, will be coordinating some questions from our audience. Erin?
Yeah, thank you guys so much to those who have already submitted questions. If you still have a question, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A box. I know early on we had a few in the chat box that I've brought over, and thanks to Rashmi, I know you've been answering them kind of as we've gone along. This was one that I really liked as someone who's had to do this before. This is probably, I guess, a question for any of the four of you. Can you talk a little about the less exciting side of integration, coding data elements in consistent ways so that they can easily be shared? And Tony's just laughing at us because he knows how hard that is.
I don't know what he's talking about. That is the most exciting part. No, I think it depends on, right? Like, well, we have 9 minutes. We can talk about this all day. But I think the idea is that if you're looking at, we're just beginning to think about how to look at global program, look at performance or impact across globally, right, across our projects. But that requires like standardization of your indicators, how will you measure things? And I'm sure, I think my fellow colleagues can understand that that's a painful process and difficult. But in terms of if we drill down, I would say as what we're doing is like, have your analysis plan up front before you even build the tool. What are you tracking? Is yes and no's enough, or do you want it to be zeros and ones? Have a good data dictionary. Comcare has a great way of like automating the coded values, and then if you get a bunch of really long strings, that's going to make it a little bit more work. So So understanding what your end product and what you're going to do with it, and then working backwards to develop the data collection or the data pipeline, so to speak, even on the specific question, right, in Comcare, those of you on the call that are familiar with it. So I'll stop there before I rant on for the next lifetime.
Great, thank you. And this maybe feeds into the next question a little bit. What is one thing you wished you had thought about or known when you started off designing your Comcare app and set it up in terms of supporting scalability?
Sorry, Erin, could you repeat that again?
Sure. So essentially, what's one thing you wish you would have thought about or known when you started designing your Comcare app in terms of supporting it to scale in the long term?
I can take that one if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I think this is really playing on to what Rashmi has been saying, and something that I've been thinking about throughout this presentation is like the standardization of our apps. So this was something that, I think we were always in the mindset and the frame that we wanted to standardize the apps itself, but what does that mean in our greater scheme of like our organizational ecosystem? And having that standardization across that was something that we've rapidly progressed to, and we're continuously working on, but that's something I think we should always have at that forefront when we're conceptualizing and designing our apps. And that really does, like Rashmi was saying, that gives us, our value for money. It reduces our cost, our time spent on our apps. And I think that was like an invaluable information that I would have liked to have had at the front and center of this design. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. That's a really great point. Anything else to add from Rashmi or Tony, or I guess Mary, you're allowed to talk to if you want.
Maybe just adding on what Jenna said, I think from standardization, and I suppose from Comcare perspective as well, I wish I had known early on how easy and how difficult it would be to get buy-in for scalability purposes. When you're trying to standardize tools, it's very difficult to kind of satisfy everyone's criteria. But yeah, I wish I had kind of foresight when we started 3 years ago almost, to be like, okay, these are the challenges in terms of adoption and usability that we'll face. And to be fair, like, we've had really great adoption and usability of Comcare and the Comcare application and system itself. Most of the time where we've seen slight pushback is when things are donor mandated, or when things are, if a donor says, no, you have to use a certain tool for data collection, that's when we go, wait, so how far can we push standardization? We can't, at that point we have to stop, because it's beyond our control. Or if we're part of a consortium and the consortium lead wants you to use a certain type of application for data collection, that's not our standard data collection tool. So I wish I'd known these things so that I would have been able to think through with the team about how to kind of tackle that. But yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that. Anything else to add from anyone before we go to the next question?
One thing I'll just add is thinking about how to quantify performance from kind of the start of building an application. This gets a little bit more technical, but kind of assessing what your baseline performance of your app is before making really big overhauls or changes to the app helps you empathize with your user if you kind of really erode the performance, or helps you get improve that buy-in with your stakeholders if you're making changes that improve the performance. So as much as you can, quantifying and collecting data about that as you go through the app building process, I think is a really valuable tool as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mary. And you sound like someone who's gotten caught in that trap a few times. I know I certainly have. Wonderful. We have another question that I love, which is how can we enforce data security concerns with interoperability? So kind of what are the things we need to be thinking about as we look to link Comcare up with other systems and still keep our data security guidelines intact?
Great question. Tony, you want to take that?
I think, you know, maybe what we should do is start calling on people. Thanks for that. As I try to, you know, run out the clock. But no, I think, you know, yes, I think data security is ever more important. I think even Rashmi's presentation made that very clear in terms of some of that strategy thinking. And for us, I think we're beginning to, we have a data protection unit, and now that's beginning to, I think now it's beginning to sort of now it's sort of trickling down to really understand what does that really actually mean for our actual end work, right? Like when you collect the data, what does that mean for your data storage, data use? And I think the hard part now is like providing that guidance, and we're just beginning to draft that and beginning the governance structure for that. So I would say easy hard, or just hard, maybe it's just hard to begin to think about that, because data is flowing constantly. So maybe others can have a better, more exciting answer.
Maybe I can say a little bit. I think, you know, the first thing is really evaluating the software or the tools that you are going to use yourselves first that you want to do your integration with. You know, if the tool that you're using is not secure enough or does not meet your data protection standards, then, you know, you are compromising all of the other integrations as well. So first, evaluate your tools, do your research, talk to your vendors, make sure that, you know, it meets your personal and organizational data protection criteria. The other thing is, I have noticed, you know, no matter how secure your tool is, if your practices are not secure or mindful of personal information, sensitive information, processing that personal sensitive information, then none of the mechanisms you have will work. So it's more trying to be mindful of understanding and being very purposeful about the information that you're collecting and feeding into the systems. So it goes both ways. Like, most of it is what you are feeding into the system, and also, you know, is the system itself that you're trying to integrate with secure or not.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rashmi. I know every year we go through a data security training, and I should remember the percentage, but something like over 90% of all data security breaches happen because of user error, because someone wrote their password on a Post-it note or didn't enable two-factor authentication or whatever it is. So it's a really great reminder about not only making sure that your you know, the technical systems are up to your data standards, but that the humans that interact with them also adhere to the standards that they should. Dave, I know we're out of time, so I don't know if you just want to wrap up very quickly.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenna, Rashmi, and Tony, and Mary, for sharing your perspectives. I know like 1 hour is not enough. We could talk about this all day. I'm definitely going to talk to our, you know, webinar team and see, you know, if we can have like, you know, Joe Rogan style, like 6-hour conversation. But once again, thank you so much. And to our audience, I hope, you know, you found the webinar insightful, and to the questions that we did not answer, we'll reach out to you or email, and somebody from the Dimagi team will be in touch. That being said, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.